Yesterday I was sitting at the Biltmore shopping center talking to Andy because he says, hey, did you see France and China? I said, no, I didn't pay attention to that. But we're talking about the ripple effect of what's going to happen. And then there's a video or YouTube thing put up by Ray Dalio. It's called The Changing World Order. That is macro, macro, macro. And so that's what Dalio writes about. And he says that after what happened, after 1944, there was a period of peace because people said, oh, America won World War II. We're now the global currency. The power shifted from Dutch to England to the United States in 1944. We became the reserve currency, which when Triffin's dilemma kicked in, trillions and probably quadrillions of dollars went out. And the changing world orders is what Dalio says. The next thing that always happens is that then the peace goes to a split inside the country. So there's a civil war inside the country between the rich and the poor. It happens all the time. But then he also says what also happens is then we go to war with outside the country. So that's China today. And then I was talking to Andy about my teacher, Buckminster Fuller. He called it the Northwest Spiral. And he said civilization always goes in a Northwest spiral. So we're talking about it at the 3-day in Scottsdale here. It starts in Singapore, Thailand area, and it goes northwest. So it went from there to France, to Germany, to England, to the United States, to Japan, and now it's in China. So what that means is that with the Northwest spiral, war is going to be inevitable, one way or the other. So that's why Andy called just saying France now joined China. France was one of our best allies ever. So again, it's this laws are being broken on the macro level. Number one is Triffin's dilemma. We have to flood the world with dollars. The second is Gresham's law, is that when bad money entered the system, which happened in 1971, when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, we flooded the world with even more fake dollars. And so that if you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, we said savers are losers. The rich don't work for money, they work for assets. And the best assets today are commodities. That's why my friend Greg Jaggers is raising Wagyu cattle. And my other friend Mike Maselli produces real oil, not oil stocks, but real oil. And the people who are producing real food will do well. So that's what we're getting at. Out of all this chaos and the dollar going bad, the dollar is going to come back in trillions. Hyperinflation, war breaks out, starvation increases. The question is, what do you do? He says, once it gets back to China or the Asia, like Thailand and Singapore area, we enter the new age of integrity. He says, what will happen for those who get the message, enter the new age of integrity? And he didn't say it directly, but that's Singapore. You ever been to Singapore? You break any of the rules. I was laughing with Veronica Tan, who was Success Resources out of Singapore, was the first people there ever talked about Rich Dad. It's the first place we ever played the cash flow board game. We're entering the age of integrity. And in Singapore, you cannot chew gum and you cannot pee on the streets. You don't tag, you don't put smoke, they take you to jail. So the age of integrity is you better obey the law. And that's where it's going to go because rule breaking has been the norm now. They put spray paint everywhere now, break windows. You're supposed to fix the window as soon as they're broken. But that's the age of integrity, and that's where we're going to smaller groups. Like, I don't hang out with people who like cheat and steal. It's not worth hanging out with them. So that's why I say I buy from Andy Schectman for 2 reasons. Number one, he can supply, but he knows his macro. And so when you're moving forward right now, you better know who you're doing business with. Let's say you have a friend or a brother-in-law, let's say, he's a drug addict and unemployed, and you lend him $100,000. The counterparty risk is your brother-in-law is a drug addict and unemployed. And that's a lot of times where you got to be reason with gold and silver. It stands all alone by itself, but not gold and silver ETFs, SLV or GLD. I want nothing paper. So the reason I buy physical from Andy Schectman, Miles Franklin Precious Metals is the moment that gold or silver coin or bar is in my hand, it's mine. There's Correct. Nobody else that counterparty to that. There's no somebody else I'm depending upon. Like if I have an SLV, which is silver ETF, I've got to control on the guy who produces that SLV. And this is my ripple effect because in 1971, I was a pilot in Vietnam flying for the Marine Corps. And that's when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. And that's when I flew off my carrier, U.S. Marine, went behind enemy lines and bought my first gold. Because when they took the dollar off the gold standard Nixon did in 71, it became fake money. And that's when I started buying gold and silver. I still have that gold and that gold coin I bought, but I don't store it in the U.S. also. I won't tell you where I stole it. Not that silly. Definitely not stored in my house. But ladies and gentlemen, is that if you don't trust your money, that's the problem. And the world is now waking up that they don't trust the money. But worst of all, Triffin dilemma is going to kick in, and trillions of dollars will come washing back on our shore. And you're going to see hyperinflation like you've never seen before. I hope I'm wrong. It always historically, this is Ray Dalio's A Changing World Order, leads to internal conflict and external conflict. Always throughout history. 5,000 years of history, it happens every single time. You might be prepared, but if your neighbor isn't prepared, you'll have visitors. Again, so let me say that's Ray Dalio. It's called A Changing World Order. It's about an hour-long video. It's well done, lots of pictures and graphs explaining, because this has happened before. And that's why you can't see the future unless you understand history. And that's part of all the Northwest Spiral that Buckminster Fuller talked about. It's now today, or the Jenga game, or the toilet paper roll is now exposed. France and China got together. I go, what does that mean? And I sat in the shopping center for a couple of hours just talking about what it is. So cash is trash. I've been saying that for years. Andy and I have talked about how we lose friends because they say, what do you mean? Don't fight the Fed. The Fed's on your side. But I think that's emergency podcast number 2. It's about what's happening with the Fed and the Treasury. And Janet Yellen, who's a Treasury Secretary, used to be the Fed chairman. And that's called collusion. It's supposed to be separation. And we also talked about earlier with George Gammon on the regular Rich Dad show, what happens if we go to Fed now versus Fed coin or CBDC, central bank digital currency. So what I'm looking at right now is Ray Dalio, The Changing World Order. I hate to say this, and I hope I'm wrong. It's the end of the American empire. It happens all the time, and it doesn't happen peacefully. What Fuller was saying, our history is wrong. It's a lie. History is his story. And even what's his name? Jim Rickards talks about the Bronze Age. And people who wrote the history say the Bronze Age started in Europe. And what Bucky Fuller is saying, it started in Asia, near Thailand. But he also, the hope and dreams are the new age of integrity will begin, and that's Singapore, where you'd better abide by the rules and the law. But that's why blockchain is coming in and crypto and all this stuff. You want to break the law, they're going to track you. So if they go to a central bank digital currency or Fed coin, that's George Orwell, 1984, Big Brother will watch you. So I don't like it, but maybe we do need some more integrity. But that's what Ray Dalio, again, it's called A Changing World Order. Go to YouTube, study that, really is well done. But there's always violence. And there was a woman at this 3-day event here in Scottsdale. She saw her sister raped and murdered. And that's what happens when civil order breaks down. So what Dalio was saying, there's a peace. After 1944, there was some peace with the Bretton Woods Agreement. But then what happened, the gap between rich and poor grows, and then the fighting turns out internally, and the next war goes external. And that's probably China. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm paying attention to it all.
Small ebook, big impact, The Wealth Tree. The only 4 ways that will make you financially free forever. Download it here for free.